All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Azzopardi. I am the team lead of Navigation Response Team New London, based out of New London, Connecticut. So we, the last 2 years, have been out here in the Great Lakes on projects, doing bathymetric work, doing some mapping work. And my goal, I guess, with this presentation is to kind of give you boots on the ground, operational level. What does it look like when we're out in the field collecting data? What are some of the issues we go through? And how do we get our work done? So just an overview here of kind of what I'll go through. I'll start off kind of talking about the navigation response branch and our navigation response teams and what our mission is and what our capabilities are. And then I'll get into talking about our 2021 work, which is out in Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary. And then into our 2022 work, where we spent pretty much all summer out here in the Great Lakes on 3 projects. One with Thunder Bay up in Alpena, and then back to Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast for a couple weeks, and then down to the Detroit River to work a project in conjunction with ship Thomas Jefferson's, one of their launches. And along the way, just kind of talking about some of our successes, some of the challenges that we went through, and some of the outreach that we tried to do along the way. So I'll get into it. So the navigation response branch, now I've talked to some of you that are NRT alumni out there, so some of you may know, but we're a branch of the Navigation Services Division within the Office of Coast Survey. And our primary mission, distilled down to the simplest form, is to conduct hydrographic surveys to update nautical charts. So what that looks like for us, what our main role is within the Office of Coast Survey, typically is smaller targeted type surveys. And what we really excel in is sort of response type work. So with Hurricane Ian right now, we're deploying a couple teams down to Florida. I know my boss, Commander Hauser over there, is busy coordinating that today. So for things like opening up ports and things like that for response work, but also things like vessel groundings. Our team, in the past has done things like go up to Maine in winter to assist in the search for a sunken tug. Our team out in Seattle just recently assisted in a search for a tragic seaplane crash up there in Puget Sound. And we're spread all over the country. You can see where those stars are. We are the closest ones pretty much to the Great Lakes in New London, Connecticut, but it's still quite a ways away. But strategically located to respond anywhere within the continental United States within 24 to 48 hours. So within NRB, we have 5 34-foot trailerable survey vessels. You can see that pretty remarkable image from Hurricane Michael there is what our vessels look like. We also have Bay Hydro 2, which is a 54-foot catamaran based in the Chesapeake Bay. We also have, based in Mississippi, a mobile integrated survey team, which is a collection of Pelican cases, which we can deploy anywhere with our, with NRB personnel onto a vessel of opportunity, whether it be a Coast Guard boat or, a marine sanctuaries vessel or really any vessel that is equipped to handle it. So, and then our headquarters, of course, is in Silver Spring, Maryland. Our team is in New London, Connecticut. We've operated for the most part as a 2-person team over the last couple of years, myself and Mr. Bloom over here. But ordinarily are manned at 3 people, and we had 3 people out in the Great Lakes this summer. Equipment-wise, we have a Kongsberg EM2040C on the vessel, as do all of our NRT vessels. And then we can also equip Edge Tech 4200 side scan sonar via pole mount. Our team is kind of unique as we have a pretty large operating area, anywhere from Maine down to the eastern shore of Virginia, and then we also cover the Great Lakes. As you see, we've been to the Great Lakes, aside from the COVID year of 2020, kind of our last 3 operating seasons. So we'll get into kind of our work that we've done here the last couple of years. So in 2021, we went out on what I believe was NRB's first non-hurricane response travel survey after COVID. So we were kind of restricted in later 2020, early 2021 to local surveys. But we got out after a good deal of risk management, things like that, for actually going out to Wisconsin, which was a pretty substantial trip for our first travel survey. The goal is to map 60 square miles off of Sheboygan and Manitowoc, Wisconsin. This is going to be all multi-beam work, so just bathymetric mapping. So as many of you probably know, things didn't go exactly as planned the first time we went out there. Those of you that have ever used outboard motors, they're not supposed to point with each other. So we had generator problems on 2 occasions. So the first week in Sheboygan went really well. And then our generator, which obviously powers all of our survey equipment, started to go bad. And ironically, out in Kohler, Wisconsin, our Kohler gas generator, we had a significant amount of trouble finding someone who was an expert to come and solve our problems. So the advantage of having a small team like us is we're very mobile and very capable to respond quickly. One of the disadvantages is our expertise is limited, particularly on troubleshooting things. Michael and I both come from more of a science background, so getting things fixed, often is a hodgepodge of duct tape and cobbling together solutions when all else fails. So we eventually were able to get our generator back up and running for about a week, and then it suffered another issue that we just weren't able to fix, and even the people that we had out to look at it weren't able to figure it out. So eventually made the hard call to go back to New London and try and get things fixed and try and come back later in the year. It was a hard decision, particularly with where we left things. So we were able to survey about half of each sheet. And with the way we left it, it wasn't a nice squared off sheet. While we were out there, while our boat was down, we did get to help out the sanctuary and be featured on an episode of Great Lakes Now, which is a YouTube channel and local TV show that airs. And it was pretty neat. It was one of the first times I had done something like that, and we got to kind of talk about our work and spread the message. So a good use of downtime while we were waiting on things to get fixed. But this is where we left things. Obviously, not very satisfying. We were, on the nice days, we would work offshore to inshore, particularly on that sheet to the left. And then on the worst days, we would kind of work closer to shore. So we were hoping to meet them up in the middle, and it didn't happen. So we went back to New London, and then about when we were in New London, got called out on a couple response surveys. One in New York City and one mobilizing for Tropical Storm Isaias that hit Long Island. Between that and just having a small crew, having both of our schedules line up to get back, we weren't able to make it back until October. The good thing about that was we were able to attend the dedication of the sanctuary out there with Senator Tammy Baldwin, NOAA Administrator Dr. Rick Spinrad, and we're able to host them aboard and kind of talk about NRB and spread our message again, and talk about not only what we were doing in the Great Lakes and what NRB did, but kind of the broader goals of mapping the lakes. And eventually, we were able to complete both sheets. It was challenging in October. Obviously, the weather conditions on Lake Michigan in October are a little bit more challenging than June and July. But it was really satisfying getting that work done. And I think momentum-wise, just was very positive into rolling into the amazing work that Geodynamics did this year and getting the entire sanctuary mapped. So when you see Geodynamics work over there with the 2 gaps cut, that was 2 of those areas were our 2021 work there. That's why there's those gaps. And then another shot of our Sheboygan sheet here, some of the cool sand waves and some of the higher resolution stuff down in the southern part of that sheet. For 2021, we mobilized again, or 2022 rather, we mobilized again to the Great Lakes. A big part of that was getting funding from GLRI and Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. With NRB, funding is always a little tricky because we may be responding to a half dozen hurricanes in a given year, or like this year, we may be responding to just the one so far, hopefully. So getting that funding obviously was very important to getting us out there and working and utilizing what we can do to get some good work done. So we left in the mid-June and then returned kind of late August. On the way out there, just kind of showcasing kind of what NRB is good at and what we can do. It was a 2-day drive to get up to Alpena from Connecticut, and about halfway was this town called Huron, Ohio, where we had a request from the USGS to map the marina. So we spent a couple hours in the morning, got out, got that mapped, and I think had that turned around to them in about a week. So getting that direct customer stakeholder engagement requests and products back to the stakeholder quickly, that's kind of NRB's bread and butter there. So so I'd take a minute to showcase that. In terms of planning for Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, so this is kind of a unique project for us because we kind of, at an operational level, we're able to pick where we worked, which isn't always the case. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Alpena is kind of at the head of the bay there, on that left-hand side image. So we were given this with the orange being the highest priority areas, and basically asked where we might be able to work, where we thought we could work. So we kind of picked out an area, because of the size of our vessel, as well as limitations from our small boat program on distance from shore, distance from harbors of safe refuge. Picked out an area there that we thought was manageable for the time we had allotted there. And then kind of cut that out with the sanctuary, and that was where we were going to work. You can see that area in particular is a little protected to the south and to the west. So we thought it might be able to best utilize our time and our weather out there. So this is the result. So we exceeded our own expectations, both in the original area, and then we were able to work with John Bright of the sanctuary to identify a couple of small gaps kind of to the south of Thunder Bay Island and North Point there that kind of fallen, I think, between the cracks of some other surveys that have been done in the past. We were out there, got about 20 days on the water, collected about 14.6 square nautical miles, and about 780 linear nautical miles. And so yeah, it was neat, finishing that original area and then kind of identifying, all right, where can we best utilize us and where can we, continue to work. So in addition to those two areas, we pushed in towards shore a little bit on our original larger sheet as well. Some highlights, we got featured in an article in the Bridge, Michigan, which is an online publication, in conjunction with the sanctuary, kind of about Great Lakes mapping, and that was pretty neat. And the reason I share these kind of press things isn't to talk around the book here, but I think it's important. We've been, I think, making an effort to, in coast surveying in particular, to share our story and get the word out there about mapping, not just in the Great Lakes, but in general. The story maps have been really cool this year. Seeing the coast survey story maps being filled in, week by week, and something that I think the sanctuaries do really well is spread their message and do outreach and press and things like that. So definitely I've learned a lot from them, and we're able to, throughout this Great Lakes work, have been able to do a lot of that stuff. So. And then these are just some zoomed in and kind of images of the two smaller areas we did that were kind of those gaps in previous coverage. And then just kind of comparing and contrasting. The top image we're doing, because of the shallow water, we were doing 200% side scan coverage with concurrent multi-beam. And the bottom area, we did full multi-beam coverage. And the reason for that is just varying depths. If we would have tried to do that top area because it's shallower with full multi-beam, would have taken significantly longer, I'm sure, as many of you know. So we also were able to gather some wreck imagery kind of opportunistically while we were out there. In particular, the image to the right was of the Flint, the wreck of the Flint. You can kind of see, perhaps, might not be able to see on the screen, but there was a vessel that struck the mooring buoy out there and dragged it along the seafloor. And this is a 10 centimeter resolution surface, and we were actually able to see the drag mark of where the buoy was leading away from the wreck, which thankfully it didn't lead towards it and kind of wrecked the historical wreck down there. So, and then we returned after we left Alpena, returned to Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast. We were mainly doing features work on this project, 9 of those being unverified chart features, which are a priority within NRB, within Coast Survey as a whole. These items on the chart that don't have positions or position approximate or position doubtful items on the chart that were put on the chart or reported at one point, but aren't necessarily known objects there. So with the Javeltex airborne LiDAR data in 2020 flown over a lot of the Wisconsin coast, there's a need to do features work out there, which is a part of mapping and charting out there. So what we did is kind of move down the coast doing a lot of that work, whether that be getting heights on rocks or verifying things like underwater features. So we had 164 features assigned to us. We were able to complete 148. And we were ahead of schedule, planned to expand our coverage to some multi-beam work south of the sanctuary. But then the generator bug struck again. And this year we had a solution ready with a portable generator that we were able to hook up. But as soon as we got that hooked up, we had a processing unit for our sonar to go down. So we were able to get that fixed. We got a spare shipped out to us. But by the time we figured all that out, it was time for us to go meet up with Thomas Jefferson in Detroit and work out there. So then another image of one of the wrecks. We gathered some data over a known wreck, the Montgomery, but things that were in the area that we could run a couple lines over here and there and collect some imagery over for the sanctuary and for others. So the Detroit River, this is a pretty neat project, a collaboration with Thomas Jefferson Launch 2904 and 4 of their personnel. So you can see kind of the sheet layout there. We were originally anticipating sheets 1 and 2 we would be able to complete. Obviously, there's a lot of work having the entire Detroit River there. But we were able to actually exceed that goal. So, we didn't really lose too many days to weather or mechanical problems. You can see sort of this is the extent of the data we collected here. So all the way from Lake St. Clair down to almost south of Fighting Island, almost down to Grosse Ile. So we did kind of opportunistically survey around some of the Army Corps channels because they had updated data. The Army Corps is constantly surveying those. So in total, we collected 785 linear nautical miles, 8.6 square nautical miles. We also had 2 new NRB personnel out there, and we're training them as we were going. So that was another goal of this project was to kind of, as we were working, train some new people. And in a lot of these areas, it was the first full bottom coverage survey of the Detroit River outside of the Army Corps channels, which was pretty neat. And then, as you might expect, in the Detroit River, a number of objects. I don't know, is that Jimmy Hoffley? You tell me. But mostly multi-beam work besides camera. We only got out to play with it, to train people for about a half day. So that was largely our Detroit River project. It was pretty productive, and we got a lot of good work done out there. So I believe that is it. So thank you for listening, and if there's any questions, I can take those too. Okay.
It will now be on the panel, so.
This is your only chance.
Are you looking at adding to your fleet or some of the USVs to make your job a little bit easier to get more coverage?
More areas. So we actually do have a uncrewed systems team. Yeah, we have an uncrewed systems team down in Stennis. And that is definitely an area that we're expanding. I think we just added, it's new in the last few years. And we have 2 Echo boats and 1 of the Remus systems down there, I believe. So it's definitely an area of focus within Go Survey, but within NRB as well. So that is a bit more mobile even than us, who's a bit smaller. So definitely an area of focus, I would say.
I'm just thinking, smaller seafloor systems or the robotic routers or any of small USVs that you could base right on your boat.
Yeah.
Without having to.
That's something I think you'd have to defer to my boss over here, but.
So we're starting in that direction. We have not committed to doing that for every single NRT. We have one, as he mentioned, down in Stennis that's kind of testing out that ConOps. What kind of areas is that appropriate for, right? A small boat like that works in some areas, but in some of the sanctuaries, it probably just would have been overwhelmed by the environment. So understanding where that works best and how to put together those kind of ConOps is part of our strategic decision-making that we're in right now. So yes, to answer like in the short term, we're thinking about it, but we have not made any large decisions as to how to move forward yet. Best understanding how to use it. We use the Echo boat as a part of our unmanned or uncrewed systems team for the first time in a full survey this summer, and had successful. It was very successful, but it was an inland waterway kind of adjacent, inland waterway adjacent. So understanding how we do that in conjunction with some of our partners, the Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for some of that. So we're talking through those details. Does that answer better what you're?
That's the data being published, like you said.
Yeah, so all of our data goes through kind of our standard process of we get it from the field unit, we process it, and then we send it to our hydrographic branch. So the data, I believe, from this summer is still kind of in our processing, or it is being processed by us, and then it'll go to the hydrographic branch, and then they'll publish it. It's usually a 1 to 2 year process before it gets out to the public domain.
All of the things that would have been gathered.
All of the, yes, all of that is still in our processing pipeline. Yeah, all of it will be publicly available. I do not.
Can you repeat the question? I'm not hearing it. Sorry.
He was just wondering when the data would be available publicly. I was saying it's still in our processing pipeline.
Yeah. If you have specific applications that you're interested in having it prior to it going to the public, please ask us. I think we go through a quality control review process of all of our data before it goes to the chart, because there's a lot of legal requirements for that. But if there are other applications, you can contact us directly and we can understand how to use that data. It is all public at, I want to say quote unquote immediately, but when we say it is going to be applicable for the chart, that's a different pipeline. So we just need to understand what your applications are. And go from there.
So everything that Mr. Azzopardi and Howard said is true. I'll just add that for the work here in the Great Lakes, particularly that in the sanctuaries, we have the additional step that much of this is subject to review under the National Historic Preservation Act, because it falls within sanctuaries. Even that which is not within the sanctuary is subject to review by the state historic preservation officer. And because so much of this is in areas where we expect to find cultural resources on the seabed, that can add unfortunately can add a significant amount of time that's not within our control. So I just wanted to temper expectations, particularly on the work here in the Great Lakes, because there is so much cultural heritage and cultural resources that we expect it to find, and that all has to be reviewed to ensure that it is in fact publicly citizen. So just as a temporary on that.
Yep.
Referencing the map that you showed of the locations of the NRB teams.
Yeah.
One thing that jumps out to me is we appreciate obviously all the work you're doing here in the Great Lakes. What's the possibility of locating an NRB team here in Traverse City, for example, that could serve the Great Lakes on a permanent basis?
Yeah, so in the past, we actually have had a Great Lakes team, I think about a decade ago. And I think that was when the funding was a little more substantial for NRB. And, you know, I think a big marketable chunk of NRB's mission is our response work that we do. So, you know, I don't know how realistic it is. That's a higher level question. There's obviously a lot of work to do here. Obviously a lot of work to do on the lakes. But in terms of NRB, a lot of where we're able to kind of promote our image and promote what we do comes from that kind of response work and hurricane responses in particular. That's where we, I think, provide our most significant value. So in terms of an NRT necessarily in the lakes, I don't know, that like I said, a higher level question, but
I'll take a stab.
Yeah.
So Azzopardi is absolutely correct that we did have a navigated response team based here in the Great Lakes. They actually split their time between, I think it was Great Lakes in the summer and then moved down to the Gulf Coast in the winter. The reality is that our office's budget has been effectively flat for many years now. And rising costs have steadily eaten into our discretionary abilities. We would love to be able to spend more time with the Great Lakes. The reality of our current budget situation is that we don't have the resources to permanently base a team here. The ability to get the New England team out here in the summers has been, I think, we managed to stretch resources as to the maximum extent possible. As we'll also mention, the mobile integrated survey team, which is basically all the equipment that he has on his boat in a bunch of Pelican cases, suitable for mounting on vessels of opportunity. And so right now we have one of those systems. We hope to build out to add a second system. And in many respects, that could be an ideal resource for the lakes. Even if we can't place a boat and a team here, if we have the so-called NIST kit available to identify vessels of opportunity and can free personnel, that could be a much more cost-effective way of coming and doing some work with the Great Lakes. So bottom line, we would love to be able to dedicate more specific resources to the Great Lakes. At this point, that's simply not a reality for us. But we certainly recognize